and 3 Canadian corvettes, Amherst, Arvida, and Sherbrooke, and the British corvette Celandine. The convoy left Halifax on September 19th and arrived in Liverpool on October 5th. So the convoy was at sea for 16 days. The escorts joined the convoy on the 23rd of September and left on the 3rd of October. So the escorts, my dad rescues, was with the convoy sailing for 10 days. And the escorts departed St. John's, and they left the convoy to head into Londonderry. So my dad's first convoy lost 1 ship, which was a straggler. The British SS Lifflin became a straggler and was sunk by U-boat 610 10 days after leaving Halifax with a loss of all 29 crew. So my dad's second convoy, 9 days after arriving in Londonderry, rescues sailed to escort convoy Oscar November 137. So rescues and the crew had 9 days in port in Londonderry to refuel, restock, and give the guys some breaks, some R&R. Okay, so ON convoys were westbound, for example, Liverpool to Halifax or New York City. This convoy departed Liverpool on the 9th of October and arrived on the 29th. So this convoy was 28 days at sea, and it was a 36-ship convoy. Rescues joined the convoy on the 12th, left on the 22nd. So again, rescues escorted this convoy for 10 days. 2 ships were sunk on this convoy. Both of them were stragglers. So the first one, American steam merchant Angelina, 9 days out, steaming at 9 knots on a non-evasive course due to reduced visibility and heavy seas. Angelina became a straggler. The first torpedo disabled the engine and destroyed many of the lifeboats. The crew of 55 abandoned the ship and the remaining lifeboats. About 40 minutes later, the second torpedo struck the magazine, and the violent explosion swamped some of the lifeboats. Now you may wonder, why was there ammunition in the magazine? I mean, Angelina had been to Liverpool, offloaded all her gear, all the merchandise or stuff that she was carrying, so she shouldn't have had any ammunition on board. Well, she turns out to be a armed merchant ship. So she had a gun, she had a gun crew. So the ammo in the magazine was for her gun. That's why there was ammo in the magazine. So 5 hours later, the British ship, rescue ship, Barry, rescued 8 men from the crew of 55. So what happened was, one of the escort corvettes, Arvida, had seen, I guess, the smoke and knew something happened, would have contacted Rescues, which was the command ship, and Rescues would have dispatched the convoy rescue ship, which was Barry, to pick up survivors, and she picked up 8 men. Now, SS Steel Navigator was also a member of the convoy, heading for New York City with a cargo of 2,000 tons of sand ballast. So she had been to Liverpool, offloaded all her merchandise, and would have been very light in the water, right, and been unstable. So they put 2,000 tons of sand ballast to lower in the water, make her more stable for her trip home. So 8 days in, they found themselves in heavy fog. The captain was afraid of colliding with other ships and decided to leave the convoy. 2 days of heavy seas caused the sand ballast to shift. The ship was listing at 40 degrees. Can you imagine? So you're walking down the flats, which is the hallway, or and the bulkhead, which is the wall, would have been as easy to walk on as the deck or the floor would have been, right? Very uncomfortable. So the crew shifted the cargo by hand, and by the 3rd day, the list was down to 12 degrees. The next day, the ship was struck by a torpedo from U-boat 610. The crew abandoned ship, but due to heavy seas, some of the lifeboats capsized. So after spending 7 days at sea in the North Atlantic during the month of October, from a crew of 55, 16 survivors were rescued by HMS Decoy. Incidentally, about 6 months later, April 43, HMS Decoy was gifted to the Royal Canadian Navy and renamed HMCS Kootenai. So over the course of the first 2 convoys, 3 ships were lost, all were stragglers, and 2 were sunk by U-boat 610. So as an aside, about a year later, U-boat 610 was sunk by a Canadian Sutherland aircraft, dropping depth charges with all 51 hands lost. So you can see here, this is not U-boat 610, but it's what it would look like, and this is what a Sutherland aircraft looks like. All right. Okay, so Sierra Charlie 107 departed New York City October 24th, arrived Liverpool November 10th. 15 ships were lost on this convoy, my dad's 3rd convoy. So all hell breaks loose on this convoy. But before we get into that, I just want to talk about the threat. So the Type 7 U-boats were the most common. 703 were built. Speed 17.2 knots on the surface and 7.6 knots submerged. 4 bow torpedo launchers, 1 stern torpedo launcher, and a total of 14 torpedoes. So what we have here in this picture here is a U-boat at periscope depth. So first we have the antenna, the HF antenna, and then we have a periscope. And you can see that she's moving to the left by the wake. So the wake is visible. Lookouts would be looking for the wake when they're looking for a U-boat at periscope depth. This is pretty calm seas. If it's rough out there, there'll be a lot of white caps, and it'd be really difficult to see the wake. It'll look like a wave. Anyway, so U-boats must be surface or at periscope depth in order to fire a torpedo. So U-boats have to be vulnerable to be able to fire a torpedo. Torpedoes are straight runners. So at this time of the war, torpedoes were straight runners. They just went straight, like a bullet. Within a year, Germany had developed a wake-homing torpedo, which, when fired, would home in on the propeller noise of a ship. So it could turn. But this time, they were straight runners. So to aim a torpedo, you aimed a torpedo by aiming the U-boat and determining a correct lead angle. So the lead angle, you've got to take into account how far the target is away from the U-boat, as well as how fast the target is going. And you determine how far in advance of the target you have to fire such that the torpedo will hit the target. Now, U-boats also have to be surface or at periscope depth in order to communicate with shore command or other U-boats. So U-boats communicate using high-frequency radio. Rescues has high-frequency direction-finding equipment, which includes an antenna very similar to what's in this picture here. So this is known as HFDF or HUF-DUF. HFDF equipment is able to determine the bearing to the source of an intercepted high-frequency radio signal. So here we have Rescue, and we have a U-boat here. And the U-boat has transmitted a communication signal on the HF radio, and Rescue has detected that signal. So Rescue knows the U-boat is somewhere along this bearing line. So Rescue would steam along that bearing line, and the lookouts and the ASDIC operator would be looking for sighting of a U-boat. And if they find one, likely the U-boat will be submerging, and then Rescue would drop a pattern of depth charges. Now, it works better if you have a couple other ships out there with you. So intersection of multiple bearing lines would give you a bearing and a range to the source of the intercepted signal. So 3 lines, they will not meet at a point. They meet at a triangle like this. So what it means is the U-boat is somewhere within that triangle. So when they have that, they would dispatch one of the escorts to this area, and they would drop a pattern of depth charges. Okay, so back to the convoy. So in this convoy, there are 42 ships in the convoy. Only 1 destroyer escort, and that's Rescue. Only 4 of the 6 corvettes sail. Now, before we carry on with the story anymore, I just want to point out, this picture over here is going to change. They're all going to be related to depth charges. So here we have depth charges on the storage racks. There's my dad and some crew members. And you're going to see the crew loading a depth charge launcher. And then you're going to see some explosions. All the explosions are just depth charges blowing up. There's no U-boats, no merchant ships exploding. They're just depth charges exploding. All right? Anyway, back to the storyline. So by the time the escorts join the convoy, U-boat 520 is already in contact with the convoy. 17 U-boats know about the convoy and are waiting for them. The escorts join the convoy at 7 p.m. on October 30th, 1942. Rescue has the only operational HFDF equipment. November 1st, afternoon, Rescue detects 25 HFDF transmissions from 8 different U-boats. So less than 24 hours later, they know they're in a world of hurt. At midnight, Empire Sunrise is struck by a torpedo and sunk. So just over 24 hours later, they have the first 48 hours later, they have the first casualty. Rescue narrowly avoids being struck by two torpedoes. So obviously someone, a lookout or an ASDIC operator, had detected a torpedo launch, notified the bridge, and they made a radical turn, and the torpedoes missed them. So throughout the night, Rescue is at action stations, racing towards U-boat sightings or HFDF transmissions, launching depth charges, and no one sleeps tonight. Here we have depth charge in a launcher. All right. Before morning, 8 ships have been sunk, no U-boats are lost. The rescue vessel Stockport is overcrowded with survivors. The next day, afternoon of November 2nd, U-boat 522 sinks the Greek freighter Parthenon. Poor weather gives brief respite of just over 24 hours. November 3rd, 9 p.m., U-boat 89 sinks SSJ Poor. November 3rd, so an hour later, while escorts are engaged elsewhere, U-boat 132 creeps up on the convoy from the south, and she sinks 3 ships. Although struck by 2 torpedoes, most of the Hadamura crew is able to abandon ship as fires break out. Hadamura is carrying munitions. So U-boat 422 spots Hadamura sinking slowly and launches a spread of torpedoes. 750 tons of high explosives detonate and instantly vaporizes the Hadamura in one of the largest pre-nuclear man-made explosions on record. Sailors on other ships thought they had been hit by a torpedo. U-boat 132 is also destroyed. So U-boat 132 is the one that was in there close and fired on 3 ships. She was still too close to Hadamura when she exploded, so she was also destroyed. The next evening, November 4th, U-boat 89 sinks the British freighter SS Dalby. Later that night, additional escorts arrived from Iceland as well as air support. 5 days later, the convoy arrives in Liverpool. No more losses. So the total Allied losses, 15 ships, 150 sailors. So Rescues leaves the convoy and arrives in Londonderry on the 10th of November. And she's off again on the 18th of November to escort another convoy. So she had 8 days in port to reload her depth charges and fuel and food and give the guys a break, because they would have been tired. When in action stations, they're not getting a lot of sleep. All right. So, Londonderry. So no ships were lost on this next convoy on their way to Halifax. However, there was still a tragedy. Ordnance Artificer 4th Class Sammy Solberg. He was in the ship's office aft on cipher watch. So his job, his trade was Ordnance Artificer, working with munitions. On watch, he was in the ship's office and he was on cipher watch. So while bringing the log to the bridge, the ship rolled. Seen clutching the torpedo davit with both arms while being engulfed in seawater, Sammy lost his grip, was dashed against a depth charge thrower, and washed overboard. Sammy was 23 years old. So what we see here is a funeral at sea. So we have a wreath here that is then thrown into the water. So these are all pictures that the crew took on board Rescues. Right? Yeah. So Rescues departed the convoy 147 and arrived in St. John's on November 28th. Andrew, at some point, Andrew said, you gotta let people know there's only one more convoy you're talking about. I'll let you know now, there's only a few more convoys I'm talking about. But there are a few more convoys, but there's still some interesting stories here. Okay, so Rescues departed St. John's and joined this convoy on December 11th, 1942 to Liverpool. No ships were lost on this convoy. So Rescues arrives in Londonderry on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1942. A long-standing naval tradition is that on Christmas Day, the commanding officer and the youngest crew member switch uniforms. All right, neat. Okay, so before I just want to talk about titles and ranks. Okay, so commanding officer, captain of the ship, CO are all titles. Depending on the size of the ship will determine the rank of the person holding that title. So on this destroyer, Rescues, the commanding officer held the rank of lieutenant commander. So here we have Lieutenant Commander Debbie Piers left in a ordinary seaman's uniform. You can see the bosun call here is tucked in his jersey or his jacket. Oh, one sec. And here the bosun call is out. And here we have ordinary seaman Bianco, youngest sailor on board, in the CO's uniform, which is the lieutenant commander's uniform. My dad has joined the picture here. All right, so Anthony Bianco joined the Royal Canadian Navy Volunteer Reserves on April 21st, 42 at the age of 17. He turned 18 on October 23rd, and for his birthday, He was assigned to Rescues. On the 27th of October, he joined Rescues, and he served on her for almost a year. He was promoted to able seaman while on Rescues. In this picture here, we have the CO, Lieutenant Commander Pierce, making a piping, using the bosun called the pipe. And this fellow here, who's joined, is the coxswain. So he'd be the senior most enlisted, senior non-commissioned member on board the ship, and he's in an ordinary seaman uniform as well. So able seaman Bianco joined HMCF Athabascan on January 5th, 1944. So about a year after this picture was taken, and he left Rescues. He was on Rescues until October, so he had 4 months somewhere else, and then he was sent to Athabascan. Athabascan was torpedoed and sunk on April 29, 1944, and able seaman Bianco was reported missing and presumed drowned. So 16 months after this picture was taken, he was deceased. He was 19 years old. This letter is a letter that was sent to his father advising him of that. Now, sadly, able seaman Bianco also had a brother who was in the army, and he was also killed in action. So his dad would have received 2 of these letters. Bianco Lake in Ontario was named in memory of able seaman Anthony Bianco. So here we have Toronto, here we have Thunder Bay, and here is Bianco Lake, Northern Ontario. There you know. So if you're ever up at Bianco Lake, you'll know the story. Rescues escorted Oscar November 158 westward with loss of 1 ship and arriving in St. John's on January 17th. So this picture at left is a picture of my dad provisioning a ship in St. John's sometime between 17 and 27 January, because on the 27th the Rescue sailed. So this is, they're on a ship. You can see there's water here and they're on a ship. It's not Rescues. So Rescues must be anchored off, and they're provisioning the ship from this other boat here. And you can read that, Canadian Packers. So I'm assuming it's probably meat products in the boxes. So Rescues arrived in Londonderry on the 4th of Feb after escorting this convoy with the loss of 3 ships. Now, this ship comes into HMS Witch, is a destroyer. It comes into Londonderry to fuel. What we see in this picture is ice on board the ship. So February, North Atlantic, you get ice buildup on the upper decks. Now, what happens is ice buildup, heavy, makes the ships top heavy, makes them unstable. So one of the chores for the crew would be go out there and chip ice, right, for safety's sake. And just through this picture in here, this is a Canadian Corvette in Londonderry, and well, it's the Eyebright, and I just like the painting of the Black Panther on the gun. All right, so Rescues remained in Londonderry for the rest of February, and then on March 2nd, Rescues joined a convoy into Algiers, Algeria. They arrived in Algiers on the 9th, and they left on the 10th, escorting another convoy. So they spent 1 night in Algeria. No ships were lost on either of these 2 convoys. They escorted 8 troop carriers to Algiers that were supporting the war in North Africa. So the crew were very proud that they were the first Canadian destroyer to enter the Mediterranean Sea during World War II. Then the key word is destroyer, because Canadian corvettes had escorted previous convoys into the Mediterranean. All right, Ketchel Mosque. Originally built in 1612, it's in the Casbah district. French colonial forces ruled Algeria from 1830 to 1962. In 1932, the French ruler decided to turn the mosque into a church. Unfortunately, the local residents weren't so happy about that, and unfortunately, over 300 protesters were killed. It still became St. Philip Cathedral, a Roman Catholic cathedral. The French demolished the church in 1844 and built the present structure from 1844 to 1878. Now, what I believe is these 2 pillars are original from the original structure built in the 1600s. Algeria regains independence in 1962, and the church becomes Ketchel Mosque. But when my dad was there, it was St. Philip Cathedral, and my dad was Roman Catholic. So this is a tourist attraction. So if you do go to Algeria, you would this is the place you would go. And as I say, it's in the Casbah district. All right. Here's a picture of the crew enjoying the nice Mediterranean weather. You can see that they're on the forecastle, forward of the ship. You got the gun. You can see the open bridge up here. And here again, the crew enjoying the nice Mediterranean weather. The ship arrived in Londonderry on March 17, 1943, so the crew had to put their clothes back on because it would have been a lot colder in Londonderry in March than it was in the Mediterranean. All right, so Rescues. Oh, this is where I tell you this is the last convoy. Okay, Rescues left Londonderry April 6 to join Convoy Oscar November 177. Meanwhile, there's another convoy coming from Halifax going to Liverpool. The Dutch steam merchant SS Blighter has been part of convoy Hotel X-Ray 231 when the convoy came under attack. The master thought they had a better chance of making Liverpool on their own. SS Blighter was sunk on April 6, 1943 by a torpedo fire from U-boat 632 that struck the engine room. 4 days later, on April 10, 1943, the survivors fired flares which were seen by the escorts of convoy Oscar November 177, one of those escorts being Rescues. So this is an original picture but taken by someone on Rescues. At 8:30 in the morning on April 10th, Rescues rescues the 23 men in lifeboat number 2. So SS Blighter crew, 54 survived, 26 perished. So from mid-April 43 until Dad left the ship in mid-July, they escorted 4 more convoys. No ships were lost due to enemy action on Dad's last 4 convoys. Now this is a picture of the USS Bow, the first of the Bow-class escort aircraft carriers, which started escort duties in March 1943. And this picture was likely taken in May 1943 while escorting Oscar November 184. Now after escorting this convoy, USS Bow was assigned to a hunter-killer anti-U-boat route. So, with improved escort capabilities, such as aircraft carriers, and going on the offensive resulted in fewer ship losses in the convoys. So this is again, back to my dad's naval training and active service record. So after he left Rescues, he just had short positions. Avalon, again in St. John's, Stadacona only for a day. Then he went to Griffin, which is in Port Arthur, now Thunder Bay. And he spent a couple months there, and then he was in York, which is Toronto, and Montcalm, which is Quebec City. He was discharged, demobilized, on 23rd November 1945. And something that I didn't know was, and this is for all military, when they were demobilized, they were given a plain clothing gratuity of $100. And that was for them to buy civilian clothes. Yeah, everyone got that when they demobilized. Okay, so I'm just going to go through my dad's medals. So the 1939-45 Star, it was awarded for 6 months active service, active operations. So my dad was on the ship for, was it 10 months? So he's definitely qualified for that. Next we have the African Star with the bar. So awarded for 1 day service in North Africa. Well, he was there for 2 days, so he qualified. And between these dates, October 42 and May 43, so he was in March 43, so he qualified for the bar as well. The Defense Medal, awarded for 6 months service in territories threatened by the enemy. And this is the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal with the silver clasp right there. That's awarded for volunteer service of at least 18 months. So my dad volunteered, so he qualified. And the clasp awarded for overseas service. And last was the War Medal, 1939 to 1945. Awarded for 28 days of full-time service. All right, this picture here, like a week ago, this picture was at the beginning of my presentation, and I thought it was because, I put it there because I thought this picture was taken after my dad enlisted, before he deployed, and he was just in uniform at parents' place or friend's place. This picture was taken. However, as I say, just a couple days ago, I realized that no, this picture was taken at the end of his career. Now, can anyone point out what I saw that made me realize this was at the end of his career, not the beginning of his career? You have to know your military uniforms.
I heard someone say medals.
Medals, that's right. So he's got his undress medals on, which his ribbons. That's right. And they would have only been awarded at the end of the war. All right? Okay.
And his beard is gone?
Well, the beard, no, it's the medals. Yeah, but you're right, no beard. But he only had the beard, I think he only had the beard when he was on Rescues. So at the beginning when he was at Avalon and that, no beard. So, and it's understandable. I mean, if you don't have to shave on a ship, you don't shave on the ship. Yeah. All right. So this here, the sailor. by Canadian sculptor Peter Buston is located in Halifax and depicts a World War II sailor toting a duffel bag and a hammock. So that lemon mess picture I had back there at the beginning of the presentation, when you saw all the bedding all rolled up behind them, that's what that is right there, so the bedding. And this is the duffel bag. And the reason I want to show the duffel bag is I have actually my dad's duffel bag here, so we'll show you my dad's duffel bag.
You've seen that.
You've seen that? Oh, you've seen that statue? Yes, in Halifax, yeah. So this is the end of the slide presentation. There's my dad here with no beard. All right. What's the time it is? Yeah, it's almost 9 o'clock, so I don't think I'll entertain any questions right here until I've shown my artifacts here. Okay, so just a reminder, this is the 11 mess picture, and we've got the rolls, the hammocks all rolled up here, which is just like the sailor has right here. Okay, so I'm just going to take my laptop and put it on over here. We still have the pictures there. Yeah, and I will show you some artifacts. There we go. So first off, this is a cap. So my dad wouldn't have worn this. It's from HMCS Saguenay. So the Rescue was part of escort group number 4. Saguenay was a destroyer and part of escort group number 3. Okay. So my dad would have traded for this. He would not have been able to wear this. And I never saw any pictures of my dad in this, so he would not have worn this. The pictures with him a cap on were all peak caps. So depending on the trade you were in, your uniform could have been slightly different. So there's one. Oh, so my dad could have traded for this cap when either he was at Avalon or on board Rescues. I don't know. This one here is British. It's from the Heliotrope. So this, my dad would have traded for this while he was Avalon, because by the time he was on Rescues, this ship had been given to the USN and had been renamed. So while he was at Avalon, he would have traded for that. Now, this is the British cap. We saw a picture of my dad. Okay, there's the sailors wearing the caps. There's a picture of my dad with this cap. As I say, this is USN, so he traded for this as well. Yep. Okay, what do we got next? Okay, so here we go, the life jacket. So there's my picture of my dad with his life jacket. So here's his life jacket. So this is what you'd wear all the time, because you could tuck it in and it didn't hinder you as you were working. And if you did fall in the water, then you blow on this and you inflate it. The ones that have flotation in them, they'd be too bulky and it'd be difficult. But I don't know if you remember the crew going into the lifeboat, they were wearing rigid foam or rigid flotation because they knew they were going in the water. But most of the time, you hoping you're not going in the water, so you want to wear this. So that's my dad's. Yeah. Also have his gas mask. There's no pictures of him with a gas mask. They were probably just issued these. It's got his name on it, right here, name on it. But they wouldn't be wearing this on the ship, so it may never have been out of the box, or probably once or twice. But I don't want to take it out just in case something, it's been in here. It's like 1943 or so. So yeah. But yeah, it smells like mothballs. Anyway, this is the cool one. This is the one. This is my dad's duffel bag. So that's why I wanted that picture there to show you what the duffel bag looks like. So here we go. So you see that beard. He's got the nickname Blackie. So there's his name, and there's his service number there. And never did get the story on this, but there's this on the back. I don't know if he drew it or he paid someone to draw it. But anyway, that's his duffel bag. That's what he would have carried when he was moving around between
What
ships.
is that on the back?
Oh, on that. It's a girl. It's a girl in a bathing suit, red hair, and high heels. It looks like.
She was in the bag.
What's that?
She was in the bag.
Yeah. So there we go.
And your mother didn't burn it?
I know, right? I know. My mom did burn it. It's not my mom. Okay, so I can entertain questions. We still have a bit of time. I guess it's only 9 o'clock. 10 minutes of questions? Do we have any questions?
Because obviously the Canadian Navy, not the Merchant Marine, right?
Canadian Navy, that's correct. Yes. Yeah.
But the escort boats, the sailors there would be the Merchant Marine.
No, on the escort boats, they were regular. They were naval volunteer reserves.
They were escorting would be.
The Merchant Marine, that's it. Yeah, the merchant ships were Merchant Marines. That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
The cap tally was Saguenay.
Yep.
It was not allowed to wear the tallies in combat They
Okay.
would wear HMCS on the hats,
Okay.
so they could never tell what ship you were on.
Okay.
So to get the actual tally, you'd have to either be in Canada or, post-conflict.
Okay.
It was a no-no.
Oh, okay. So. Okay, so I didn't know that. Okay, that's okay.
And you didn't mention the fact that the Canadian forces got thrown off the Atlantic for retraining in the 40s, because 43 was the nasty period,
Yeah.
and we built so many ships and our Navy had grown so fast that we were not fully equipped and we lost a lot of ships, and Churchill got roused and we got tossed and retrained and went back. But the problem is we didn't have all the technology the Brits had at that point.
That's right.
We were getting the leftovers, what we could.
Yeah.
And we were sort of like, go train and come back and play,
Yeah.
which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, it's like the, if you read up on the rescues getting their high-frequency direction finding equipment, it was the CEO of the ship that went and wheeled and dealed and got that equipment on board his ship. So he was one of the few Canadian destroyers that actually had that equipment. Now, as the war got on, all the ships got it, and then they could do more triangulating. But initially, rescues was one of the few that had that equipment. Yeah.
Was he happy to come home when it was over?
I think so. Yes. You know, it's funny. I did a presentation. Grade 10 history was Canadian history, and including World War II. And I did a presentation like this, where basically I brought in photographs, and there was a machine to project a photograph onto a screen, and I just talked to those photographs, basically just repeating the stories my dad had told me. But in the research of doing this here, I wish he was still on the other end of a phone, because I had a lot more questions now than I did when I was in grade 10 history class. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm surprised he wasn't sent to Halifax instead from Montreal, instead of going to BC.
Well, okay, so BC was for training.
Yeah, a lot of your trainings.
Yeah, that's what the training was. But after he was off the ship, he bounced around. He didn't spend much time in Halifax. He was there twice, but only for like 3 days each time. Yeah.
Halifax was more combat role, so it was easier to train them out west, because we've only got, that ocean wasn't getting hammered.
That's
This
right.
one was, so train there, come here.
Yeah. Well, it still is the case right now. A lot of the training, junior people is done on the West Coast, and more senior people are trained in Halifax in the Navy. Yeah.
I thought because of the depth of Halifax, that was mostly used for the start of the convoys. You're saying it was Avalon, Newfoundland.
No. In Avalon, Newfoundland was where the escorts were. So the convoy the convoy would join up or form up in Halifax, and there'd be ships that would escort them to Newfoundland, where the mid-ocean escorts would take over. That's right. Yeah. Okay, is that it for questions then?